Well, welcome everybody. Hello, and thank you for joining us today for this offering of Pod Presents, The Fearless Factor, Fear in the Workplace. I'm Angela Stopper, your Campus Chief Learning Officer, and I'm delighted to bring us together to explore this important and timely topic with a speaker who has made a name for herself, helping people understand and overcome fear. Today with us, we have Jacqueline Wells, the author of multiple books and the creator of Transformational Strategies for Success, a comprehensive program designed to enhance self-awareness, emotional intelligence, and communication skills. Jacqueline is also a TEDx speaker. Her talk, Unleash the Power of Fear and the Secret to Success and Happiness, has been viewed worldwide. In today's session, she's going to share with you strategies to overcome fear, doubts, and the anxieties that stop you from being your very best self. Jacqueline, I'm so thrilled to have you here with us today. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for sharing your expertise with this wonderful group of Berkeley staff that are here with you or watching your recording. With that, I just want to turn it over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Angela. And I always appreciate when you invite me in to talk about my favorite subject. So we're going to talk about the power of fear at work. Now, there's a lot of people who wonder if there's really is fear at work. Well, just think about certain behaviors that happen in the workplace that may not strike you as the word fear attached to it, but we're going to explore today what that actually looks like. And I think there will be a lot of recognition and certain patterns that you've experienced yourself in the workplace and maybe even have offered it out at certain points. So we're going to really dive in today for this brief hour that we have. I usually cover this in several hours, but we're going to really do the express version. And I want you all to play full out with me because a lot of what our fears are not actually real. There's stuff that we make up, and it's ways in which we go through our lives limiting ourselves. And I want to really dig into that. So here's my first slide. Let me open this up here, and let's go forward. Okay, let's see. Here we go. Here's the greatest driver for success in the human experience. I said this in my TEDx talk, and the reason I believe in this is because when fear shows up, it's kind of like an alarm. It's, if you think about it like a smoke alarm, it's going off and you have to shut that thing down. Fear is a lot like that. And we're going to explore the issues of why fear is the greatest driver for success in the human experience. But as it says at the bottom of this quote, you must find your courage, because the other side of fear is the courage to challenge it and find out if it's true or not. So why do we fear? Fear is a natural response, is designed to help us survive. It's a very primitive response, and we're going to talk about what happens in the brain when that response is triggered. Fear is imagination-based because frequently we do not have empirical evidence for it. We simply have the stories that we tell ourselves. And of course, if these stories are told over and over again, they become a conditioned response. So here's where I fit in on this one, how I learned to love fear. I've been dealing with fear for approximately 71 years at this point in time. Now, that number might surprise you because that means that I started to learn about fear when I was quite young. And I'm very, very obvious in my age. I'm almost 73. Come another month from now, I will be 73. So the way that I look at it is I had to learn to run and hide from a violent alcoholic father at a very early age. Hide under the table. I had to learn how to read the moods of the room. And I had to learn to really become an astute observer of human behavior. So how I learned to love fear was because I kept getting these circumstances in my life that forced me to look at how I was showing up. What were the circumstances that were coming into my life? I left home at 16 and I was living in Edinburgh, Scotland, and I moved to London. So leaving home at 16 with no job, nowhere to live, and nowhere to really, belong, if you like, that was a huge issue for me. But I did it because my home life was so miserable. I just wanted to be out of it. Now, that also meant I left school at 15. Now, I'm talking to people who work for a learning institute. So, leaving school at 15, you don't expect to do much with your life. And that was really the expectation for me. By the time I was 19, I was pregnant with someone's child. I had no idea who it was, but I had to give the child up for adoption. That happened when I was 20 years old. So before I'm 20 years old, there's a ton of stuff that I have to deal with that is all about fear. Well, fear drove me through drinks, alcohol, and drugs, and different ways in which I self-sabotaged over and over and over again. And it was that way until I was actually about 33 when I realized I was pregnant for the third time, having given my first child up for adoption. My second one left with his father, and my third one is now on the way, when I realized that she would leave me before I left her. And that became my journey to learn how to love the fear and learn to get to the other side of it. That child, in fact, ended up at Wellesley, so I think she probably did okay given the circumstances. But here's the thing about it. Every lesson that I had in life forced me to look at the fear that was driving me. Now, I've written several books, as Angela mentioned. I've created programs. I'm a professionally trained singer. I was a martial artist for many years. I took up CrossFit when I was in my 60s. And I've challenged myself over and over again to confront the fears that held me back, including the thinking and behavior that became very much a part of the story that I have achieved over this lifetime. So I love fear because it is that piece in you that says there's more. There's something more for you to go with. So let's dig in a little bit deeper on that one. I want you to put in the chat, what do you fear? What are your top 3 personal fears that's related to your personal and professional life? And I'm going to take a pause here while you do that so we can take a little look at what that looks like for you. And Angela, I can't see the chat, so I'm going to depend on you to give me some feedback here.
So folks, I think, are starting to type in. So I shared 3 of my kind of professional fears just to get the ball rolling. Being alone, being laughed at with malice, not with humor, but with malice or scorn, or being sabotaged, or kind of probably maybe 3 of my big fears, to be vulnerable with the group here. And then as others come in, I'll be happy to share those as well. If anybody wants to just email me personally too, I can share those if you don't want to share with the full group.
Is that you who stinks?
So here's the thing about sharing this particular, hold on, I think I can actually pull up the chat here. Sorry, I'm going the wrong way. There you go. The thing about our fears primarily is the insecurity of what the fear story is telling you. So to your point, Angela, you don't want to be ridiculed. You don't want to feel that someone is working against your best interests. And the embarrassment and humiliation, and we're going to talk about the primary fears that are coming up. What you just expressed is really tied into humiliation.
Absolutely. I'm getting some more in there. Fear of not achieving life goals, illness, and loss of aging parents is one that came in anonymously.
Mm-hmm. So the fear of not achieving goals. Here's my simple philosophy. For today, I have everything I need and I'm taking action for tomorrow. When we fear that we can't meet our goals, it's simply about, do you believe that you can reach those goals? Now take that in for a second. Do you believe in yourself? Are you taking ownership of your capabilities? Because frequently what I hear is the fear of, I'm not good enough. The fear of, I'm not capable. The fear of, I'm not worthy or deserving, or the fear of not being loved. And these are really primary to the issues that are really at rock bottom for any fears that might be surfacing. Is there anything else out there?
There is. We have speaking up, connecting, missing steps in complex processes, making mistakes, being alone, letting people down. Financial insecurity of both ourselves and our organization is coming up. Public speaking is coming up. Rejection, looking like you don't know what you're doing,
Yeah.
being misunderstood.
Yeah. So you can see that there's themes here that are arising. And the public speaking piece, people would rather not have to get in front of an audience simply because you're going to be judged, you're going to be criticized, you might not even perform the way that you think you need to perform. And as a public speaker, I'm very comfortable in this milieu at this point in time, but there was a time when I really wondered if what I had to say was actually valuable to others. But more importantly, it's the fear of rejection. So when we move forward with this, your only limit is your mind. And I love this piece simply because it's true. The only limit is your mind. How you think about yourself, how you think about how you're showing up in the world, how you think about your relationships with others, how you think about your capabilities as a professional. This is all tied into the same thing. So your only limit is your mind, and you have to question those stories that you tell yourself. Because 9 times out of 10, I'll tell you, unless you have empirical evidence, there's no proof that what you tell yourself is going to come true or that is really the way it is. Now, certainly there was a mention of, losing your parents. We're all going to lose our parents at some point. And that's just the way life is. I lost mine when they were in their 60s. So that means I've lost my parents, 20 years, 30 years ago. So, it's been a while, but this is a piece for you to think about. Your only limit is in your mind. So here are the fundamental fears that I talked about earlier. The fear of loss. I heard that in the ways in which you think about it. Humiliation, abandonment, rejection, and failure and success. And I have to tell you, when I ask people, what is your greatest fear? They'll come up with failure. But here's the thing. Failure is simply an expectation, a choice, or a decision that did not go the way you had planned. Nothing is ever fatal when it comes to failure. And it's simply about choosing differently. Because the idea of failure is simply that. I have to make another choice. Now, on the other side, on the flip side of failure is success. Success is the other side of the coin, the fear of success. Well, what's the fear of success really all about? Again, am I good enough? Am I capable? Will my life change? What will people think of me if I am successful? Will I have to reorient my life if I'm successful? And the answer to all of that, of course, is yes, you will. But can you adapt? Absolutely, you will. Will the people around you adapt? Yes, they will. And if they don't adapt, you don't want them in your life anyway, because it's not about them, it's about you. And that's another piece that we have to think about. Too many of us spend our lives looking across the way to make sure that people approve of us. And the only person you need to approve of is yourself. And that's a big one right there. So here's a great quote. Fear is a reaction and courage is a decision. And as I said earlier, the other side of fear is courage. Being fearless is not the absence of fear, but the courage to take the next step. And that next step can be as small or as large as you want, but you're moving forward. And that's what I really ask you to do when you are looking at those fears that may be limiting who you are, limiting your potential, limiting the opportunities that might be coming your way. Have the courage to question it, have the courage to take a different point of view and see what happens. I have a tagline that says, be fearless, see what happens. And I think that's really the big thing that's got me through my life, frankly. So let's check in, find out, what are you learning so far? What is resonating with you? And, what are you taking away? So Angela, if you could get some feedback on that, that would be great.
Again, you can go ahead and put some of your thoughts, some of your takeaways, some of your ahas that you maybe have already had. We got one. I had mentioned, thanking folks for their vulnerability because naming those fears is maybe one of the steps we need to do to overcome them. And
Yeah.
one of the feedback was that it was a really good point, taking some time to identify fears. This person has done that, but it's really this is maybe the first time they've written them down.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that some others coming back, fear is often worrying or of a reaction that might be coming, something we're dreading. Fear might be a symptom of something else. I see one, courage is a decision. That was somebody's aha that has come through. That one got a thumbs up. So 2 people are agreeing on that one.
Excellent.
Fear is a reaction. Courage is the decision or action to take. Identifying and facing it is the first step in normalizing that it's natural, that fear is natural.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so taking all of that into account, getting back to the idea, it's about your mind. It's about how your mind is processing the stories you attach to that emotion of fear. And we're going to talk about that in a second, to talk about the neurology of fear. Now, we've all heard the story that the amygdala, the fight or flight piece of your brain, the size of a walnut, is the primitive brain. And it's true. When people were running across the savannah and there was wild animals chasing them, there was definitely a piece. In fact, there's, a book out there by Robert Sapolsky called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. And it's only because when these wild animals are being chased, their cortisol level goes up through the roof. But once they're no longer being chased, it comes right back down again. And they go back to grazing on the savannah again. So zebras don't get ulcers, but human beings do. The brain is run by what's called catecholamines. Now, catecholamines are a mixture of the norepinephrine, epinephrine, and adrenaline. Dopamine is in there too. So you've got the feel good and the not so feel good stuff in there that then gets attached to the sympathetic nervous system. And of course, that is the reaction of the brain that creates a stimulus that is known as an emotion. And that emotion is given a label. And in this case, it's the label of fear. Now, if we've got a response to an emotion and we label it fear, then what are we afraid of? Because you have to make sense of it. We are people who look for rational descriptions of whatever it is, but frequently it's not rational. Emotional stuff isn't rational for the most part. It isn't. So that's again coming back to what my position is. Question it. Ask yourself, is it true? Do I have evidence that these fears are real? Or are they simply something that I've adopted because it's always been there? Now, you've heard the expression, I've always done things this way. Well, you've always thought this way. So how about thinking differently? We'll go back to the old Apple thing. Think differently, because we all have the power to think differently. Nothing is ever set in stone. So if we look at the impact of what this neural reaction does, it sends cortisol levels to the high levels and keeps them there. We're not zebras. So our cortisol levels stay there. What does that lead to? It leads to ulcers, yes. It leads to heart symptoms, diabetes, depression, anxiety. I mean, there's no end to the list of this, and the biological factors are created by this emotion when it's kept on high alert. It's when you are constantly on high alert, which you are when you're stressed out, your body's going to take a toll. Your adrenals suffer. You start to feel your stomach's off. There's a whole lot of symptoms that I'm pretty sure you have experienced from time to time. I know I'm an entrepreneur. Guess what? My stress levels have been through the roof at times because I wasn't making enough money or because people weren't paying any attention to what I was doing. So yeah, it was a struggle and a challenge, but I had to work my way out of it. And I had to understand that those fears were patterns of behavior that had been indoctrinated into me at a very early age. I was told for a long time I would never amount to much. And I believed it. And my behaviors showed up in that way. I was in AA for 5 years before I realized that it wasn't about the drinking, it was about the thinking. And it was the thinking that was the toxic part of my existence, and it needed to be changed. So think about that when you're considering everything that I have to say today. It's an important piece if we want to live healthy in mind, body, and spirit. So here in the workplace is what fear costs. And as you can see at the bottom, 44 billion in lost revenue annually due to these factors. And this has been researched across multiple channels, and it has some real relevance. And I'm sure even at UC Berkeley, your turnover rates can be high because of some of these fear-based behaviors that we're going to talk about in a second. So let's talk about, again, numbers. 50% of employees delayed decisions due to fear. 60% believe fear impacts team interactions. 42% don't feel cared for, and 87% of employers don't believe that their organization currently demonstrate care. Whoa. That's high numbers right there. So here's my question for you in the chat again. Have any of you figured this out? Delaying decisions due to fear? Team interactions, I heard speaking up earlier is one of the problems, and that is a big one, especially if you're a woman. Finding your voice in the room is a really important piece. And when we're silent, we're basically giving permission for the bullshit stuff that goes down. So these are numbers that are pretty real and need to be looked at. Any comments on that one?
Getting some people resonating with the delaying decisions and the impact of the interactions, saying that they can relate to those, they can relate to all of them, can see kind of the last two maybe kind of more ebbing and flowing versus the first two being more kind of standard in this person's life.
Yeah. So look at the numbers, 50% and 60%. These are high numbers. We're not just talking about, 20% of the people feel that way. There's quite a lot. And, team interactions, this is about communication, it's about trust, it's about vulnerability. And we mentioned vulnerability earlier. So let's get one thing clear. Vulnerability is a strength. It's not a weakness. When I say that I don't know, I'm simply saying I don't have enough information. When I say that I feel a certain way, it's simply being human. When I admit that there are things in my life that are not going well, I'm simply checking in with the rest of humanity, because everybody's got the same stuff going on. There's no question about it. I can tell you a story about what I'm concerned about or what I'm feeling challenged with, and you'll nod your head and you'll go, oh yeah, I know that one. I've been there too. That's what happens. So what do employees feel? Look at this list of things. Disrespected, misunderstood, blamed, shamed, rejected, humiliated, judged, and most of all, pissed off. So if you look at this list, where have you felt any of those?
There's a positive comment in the chat that about the organization currently not demonstrating care. Someone is saying that they're really happy that our campus does share a lot of support programs and resources for employees, even things like what we're doing right now.
Yes.
And while it's still a challenge, they're glad to see that we're maybe being progressive in this space.
Yes. Well, I would expect that, because you have such a vibrant leadership program and care program within UC Berkeley for everyone who works there. So this makes sense. Anybody willing to put a hand up and say that any of this has happened in their world? I know you mentioned humiliation earlier, Angela, and I'm sure that's for a reason. You probably experienced that.
Yeah, some things coming in the chat around burnout.
And burnout is a big issue because burnout is primarily fear-based. It's about not having clear boundaries, not being able to say, I'm sorry, I can't, or I won't, or keeping the yes conversation. Can you do this? Yes, 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 yes. And suddenly you find your plate is overloaded and you haven't set clear enough boundary for yourself. Saying no, that tiny little word with 2 letters in it, is one of the hardest things for a lot of people to say. No, that doesn't work for me. No, I don't belong here. No. So think about next time when you say yes and you really mean no, and have the courage to say no and see what happens.
Yeah, that just came through in the chat. Somebody said they feel like they can't say no.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you feel like you can't say no, you have to ask yourself why. Why can't I say no? What is it that I will miss if I say no? Will it be I'll lose my job if I say no? Rarely is that the case. Might be pissed off that you said no, but simply you're setting very clear boundaries for yourself. So when we keep saying yes, and I have clients who keep saying yes, you take on enormous burdens and you take on responsibility for other people's stuff that they should be taking responsibility for themselves. Very simple. I see Angela nodding her head there. She gets that one. And I'm pretty sure a few of you do too. All right, let's move it along. Here's welcome to another fun day at work. And these are the kind of things that you have to deal with on a daily basis. And the thing is, for a lot of it, people are unconscious that they're doing it. They're not even thinking about all the specificities of what that means. How many managers have you had who've micromanaged you? That's a big one right there. And then how many managers complain that they have too much work on their plate because they're too busy micromanaging other people? Poor decision making because there wasn't enough thought put into it. Command and control, just do it my way and don't ask questions. And of course, when things go wrong, there's blame, there's judgment, and there's often poor communication, lack of transparency, which of course leads to confusion. And a lot of people will be faced with worrying about retribution. If I do step up, if I do push back, then I'm going to suffer for it. And the worst crime of all is assumptions. We don't test our assumptions often enough. We presume and we go for it instead of looking for evidence about what is actually going on. So I'm back to takeaways again. I've been feeding you a lot of information in a very short space of time. As I said, I usually take a good 2 to 3 hours to do this workshop. So I'm trying to give you the big picture overview here. So what are you taking away from this so far? What's hitting home for you?
There's one comment that folks are kind of just noting some of the external factors like budget situations, layoffs, more demands on limited staff. That is affecting morale and burnout. So there are some of those external factors that are also impacting that internal maybe fear response.
Mm-hmm. So then the big question becomes, what do you want to do about that? Because it's not enough just to sit back and accept that's what it is. You have to make a decision for yourself about what you're willing to accept. Everybody's entitled to an opinion, and we're entitled to accept or reject them. But you've got to have the courage to be able to stand up and do that. And if you are just accepting whatever it is, and then you bury your feelings around it, the cortisol levels will go up and you start to feel stressed.
Somebody wrote that, fear and challenge are not unique to any of us. It's, widely experienced, that kind of normalizing it, seeing the physical emotions play out while not being maybe aware of what's causing them is kind of an aha for somebody thinking about that.
Mm-hmm. A lot of this is about checking in with people. What's going on for you? We get busy lives, and I get that. You've always got far too much to do, and you just wish people would get on with it, and that's it. But we've got to be able to take that step back and go, okay, if this is not going the way that I want it to, what needs to change here? And what do I need to know more of in order for that to be different? So that means you have to take the time to actually sit down with the people that you're working with and ask the questions. And my favorite one is always, when things aren't going the way that you want them to go, can you help me understand what it is that's missing? Or can you help me understand what it is that you're feeling about this? Or can you help me understand where we don't have enough information to make the right decisions? There's all kinds of ways in which you can slice and dice this particular phrase. But I think it's a really valuable one in helping to sit down without judgment. We're not here to judge. We're simply here to get more information. And that's, I think, where people get impatient and they're moving on to the next thing because they haven't had the time to really dig in to the fundamental pieces that might be getting in the way.
Yeah, I think that just really resonated with someone. They said, they sometimes feel like a courageous response from an individual might lead to the perception that they're difficult to work with. And so if you're framing your questions in more of that discovering to learn, asking questions to learn, asking questions, I think that can really help with those courageous responses coming forward in the way you're talking about, Jacqueline, versus thinking, oh, that person's just difficult to work with.
Well, again, that comes back to what I said earlier about assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
We have to question our assumptions because 9 times out of 10, you don't have enough information for you to come to that form of judgment. It's based on your own experiences. So you just figure, yeah, it is what it is, and you go from there. So being able to question those assumptions is a key factor in sitting down and finding out what's really going on and not just make a blanket decision. It is what it is. Because if it's like what you're putting out there is what you get back, frankly, and a lot of it doesn't sit right. So that's a piece for us to consider also going forward. So here's some ideas for you. Leaders who address their fears set a powerful example for their teams, and that includes being vulnerable, being able to say, I don't know. And I don't know is a really big piece of this. Acknowledging fears and allowing people to express concerns and challenges in a safe environment. Now, we talk about psychological safety. Psychological safety is a wonderful expression, but what does that mean? It means that I'm creating a place for you to open up. Now, I know that this is very important for UC Berkeley because that piece of belonging is integral to your entire philosophy of how you go about things there. So giving people that opportunity, again, to open up and express themselves without judgment is going to be a big piece for you. So, and of course, that openness, as I said, individual growth and collective resilience. When you give people permission to open up, when you give permission to feel safe, to not be judged, guess what? It comes back tenfold because people trust you more. People communicate more openly. People bring their whole self without fear of retribution, which is what we covered earlier. So that's another piece for you to think about as you're going forward. Practical steps for leaders. Let's talk about that. So personal fears and acknowledge. Practice vulnerability. Develop and model emotional intelligence. Well, let me talk about that one for a second. We went away from there, but I'm going to go back to that slide for a second. Emotional intelligence is a very big part of the leadership programs that UC Berkeley offers to employees. At the base of that is know thyself. Knowing yourself is really the key to using fear as a motivator, not as a deterrent. Do I believe my own bullshit? Many of us do. I do too. Have done, getting better at it. The self-examination piece is really critical. That's a big piece of emotional intelligence, because when we self-examine, when we are reflective enough to know where we might be in limitation, we have a lot more to give others in terms of understanding where they're coming from too. And it's not just at work, it's at home. I've been married for 44 years, and I have to tell you, I have been impatient with him on many, many, many occasions. And it's simply because I didn't take the time to understand where he was coming from. So this is a big one you have to really look at. Fear is a motivator, not a deterrent. Don't run away from it. You're not on the savannas, right? Running away from a massive man-eating creature. You're running away from yourself. And that's something to consider. When we run away from ourselves, when we're not showing up with ownership and authority for ourselves, embracing our strengths and our weaknesses. And the other thing about strengths and weaknesses is frequently our greatest weaknesses, our greatest strength misapplied. So we have to always consider how that shows up for us. Do you have any thoughts on that one?
There's a note here about using challenges and fears as a catalyst to fuel you and transform that energy is something that really resonated with someone.
Yeah. And it is a big one. And as I said at the very beginning, why I love fear, because when my fear alarm goes off, there's my opportunity to examine. What's that about? Where does that stem from? I recently went through a fear transformation myself when I realized that there was a pattern that had been established when I was a very small child that was still hanging on, and it was holding me back. But it took a lot of reflection to be able to break through that and claim the piece of me now, not the piece of me then. Because who you were even a year or two ago is very different from the person you are today, because we're constantly evolving. And when we talked about the brain earlier, we're talking about it from the point of view of your brain is also evolving based on what you feed it. And it's a hungry creature, your brain. It likes to be fed regularly, but it likes to be fed the good stuff. It likes to be fed the stuff that helps you to grow. You've heard the expression neuroplasticity. Well, neuroplasticity is about how do we grow through our experiences. And this is the big one. And of course, that ties into another piece of neurology called epigenetics, again, about our environment and how we use our environment to help us grow and develop. And that's where we should all be. And we're going to talk about that one right now, because, again, examine the stories you tell yourself. 9 times out of 10, they're not true. You don't have evidence. So consider where you're holding back around your fears, and then think about, how do I move beyond that? What support do I need? Who do I need to talk to in order for this to not be true for me any longer? And as it says here, keep moving forward with determination. Determination is my middle name. You tell me I can't do something, I'll say, watch me. That's my determination. So I've never allowed myself just to sit back and go, well, it is what it is. No. It is what I make it. And that's the secret to making yourself or pushing yourself forward. Never stop learning. You work for UC Berkeley. So yes, it's always going to be about learning. And this is a big piece of, again, of your fundamental beliefs. Fear fosters learning. Everything I've just said to you today, if you haven't learned anything from everything I've said about fear, you're not paying attention. So I would say, think about your fear and what you're learning from that emotion. Innovation is another thing that Berkeley prides itself on. This is something that really matters a great deal to you. And when we're in fear, we're not really innovating. We're not trusting the process. We're not pushing the boundaries. We're not expressing ourselves in ways that allows us to see something new ways of doing things, new ways of thinking, new ways that actually improve the quality of our lives and the lives around us. So push past the fear to get to the innovation. Negative thinking. We're all great at thinking badly about ourselves. We are our own worst enemies. And I like to say, make yourself your own best friend and talk to yourself the way you would a friend when you want to come down hard on yourself. I called it the 2x4 syndrome for years, slamming up the side of your head. How many times do you have to do that? It's like those old monks who use the whips to self-flagellate. Negative thinking, it's kind of like that. So you have to ask yourself the messages of negative thinking. I'm stupid, I'm not good enough, I'm, self-doubt, whatever it is. Where did that first begin? I guarantee you it was placed there by people who didn't know any better. So fight the urge for negativity. Because here's the other thing about the brain. It doesn't distinguish between negative and positive. It's about the energy that it's fed and the response you want to give to that energy. So increase your positivity. Question your negativity. Set realistic goals because self-doubt kills more dreams than failure ever will. Self-doubt keeps you from even starting. So set realistic goals for yourself. You might have a big, ambitious goal out there, but it takes incremental steps to get there. So be clear on what those incremental steps are for you. Build a supportive network. This is really a critical piece. We need to have people we can bounce ideas off. We need to have people we can share our innermost insecurities with. Because I guarantee you that most of our insecurities are universal and people can relate and people aren't going to judge you because you have them. But use that supportive network to not only have alliances and collaborations, which again is another big piece of what you seek in the Berkeley community, those collaborations. This is an important piece, building a supportive network, because it does promote collaboration and trust. And to build collaboration and trust, you've got to step outside of the fear of being judged, of being humiliated, of having some kind of retribution, of not being able to express yourself clearly. You've got to be able to do this. Trust yourself. It was said many years ago that fear is our inability to trust that we can handle whatever comes our way. I didn't say that. Susan Jeffers said that in her book, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And she endorsed my first book. So think about that for a moment. And remember, being fearless is not the absence of fear, but it's the courage to take that next step. Because that's where continuous improvement comes from, taking that next step. And we can learn all kinds of stuff in our lifetime and still not learn enough, frankly. But as long as we keep moving forward, then we're going to continue to grow. And that's really what we should all be doing. So here's the key takeaways for today. A fearless organization fosters a learning culture. Well, it goes without saying, I'm talking to UC Berkeley. The fear of failure, the other side of that, is promoting team collaboration, because we all fail one way or another, but we can all forgive in the process. The fear of uncertainty is to strengthen the communication. And here's what I like to say about uncertainty, by the way. It's wonderful. It provides opportunities because the only thing about life that we can be guaranteed on is uncertainty. And right now, we're facing a great deal of it out in the world. And all you can do is manage your own life. So uncertainty, rather than look for the comfort zone and stay in the safe zone, which is another illusion, frankly, embrace the uncertainty and strengthen it through communication. The fear of unexpected challenges, that's about trust yourself and build trust with others. The fear of retribution, of course, is creating a psychologically safe environment where retribution is not something that the organization as a whole does. And absolutely increase your self-awareness and emotional intelligence, because when you ask the question, who am I? Most people can't answer that unless they put a label or a role on it. It's a very deep and difficult conversation or difficult piece to actually look at, but you have to be asking yourself, who am I? If I take away everything else, who am I? Existential, but worth the time to look at it. Encouraging personal and professional development, well, here you are. This is all part of the deal. So you get the opportunity to self-reflect. And this is a recording, so feel free to go back to it. There might be something in here that's worth listening to again. I like to say in my presentations, you might be hearing stuff you've already heard before, but maybe today you'll hear it differently and be able to take some action on it. So fear is the greatest driver for success. But first you must find your courage. This is a big one right here. I found my courage by stepping up, even when I felt like all the odds were against me. And I've had so many opportunities in life to feel that way. And much more than I can go into in this brief presentation. But each time there was always a sense of there's something more on the other side. And I have to give it some room to find out what that is. And if I can't do it by myself, and rarely can we do it by ourselves, frankly, you go find someone who can listen, who can understand, who can support, and who gives you that glimpse of what it looks like to do it differently. And then you go take the actions in order for that to be true, and develop and find the person that you absolutely didn't believe was going to be there. That's been my story. And when I look back on my life now and I look at what I'm doing just today, I have to look in surprise and go, wow, how did you get from there to here? One step at a time. That's all it took. One step at a time. Thank you for being here with me today. I have really enjoyed presenting, and I'd love to hear any of your questions before we wrap for today.
Jacqueline, thank you so much for your wonderful insights, for your thought-provoking talk, for the points that you made for folks. We do have, 10 minutes. So if anybody has any questions, anything they want to dig more deeply on, feel free to come off mute. Feel free to throw them in the chat. Feel free to email them or chat them to me privately. I'm happy to chat them to Jacqueline as well. What's on your minds?
And I'm open to questions. I love questions, so feel free to ask me anything you want. And you can come off mute for that.
There was one comment earlier about having experienced expressing themselves, and it was taken as a complaint and not a way that we can address things as a team. And I think that was coming up when you were talking about
I see
how that past experience can impact how we look at the future. And so maybe dig a little bit.
So you challenge somebody, and I'm looking at Smita here, who put this in the chat. You challenge somebody based on something that you were doing, and they saw it as a complaint. Maybe the wording was off, but then there's also the possibility that it wasn't about you. It was about the person receiving the information and their defensive reaction. You see that all the time. What do you mean? Yeah, well, There you go.
Thanks, Jacqueline. Thank you so much for talking about this. And Angela, thank you so much for having this wonderful sessions. It is so helpful to see. Sorry, I'm not on the camera because I'm having my lunch break at the same time I'm listening to the session. But I just want to make sure that I give you this feedback right away that these sessions that you guys are conducting are tremendously helpful for somebody who is like, I'm an immigrant. I landed in this country like 9 years back. I'm still trying to adjust to the life cycle. So for me to be able to express at the same level as the other team members, it might take like double or triple efforts because I've come from a very different culture. But I have tried to believe in myself that being honest and and give honest feedback about how I'm feeling about the current transitions, the team structure, or the work has helped me. But as you said, not all the time it is equally taken, it is taken the same way, the way you express it, because depending on how the other person perceives it is has already always changed. But thanks, Angela, I'm never going to stop that. I am going to keep talking about how I feel, because sometimes if you are the only person talking in the room, it feels like, oh, it's only her that she's having all these problems, because others don't tend to talk because of fear of being misunderstood. But I tried that and it's kind of helping me. I still get into the loop when these things happen. I still get discouraged. I still get into the loop, but I'm constantly trying with the help of my family to push myself and see through how this is going to make me more stronger versus making me weaker and trying to avoid this. So thank you so much, both of you, for this wonderful session today.
Well, continue to be fearless, Smita. You've already been so that way in so many different aspects of your life. So just keep doing what you need to do. Show up. There you go.
I love that. Scott, I see your hand up. Can you come off mute?
Sure. Thanks, Angela. Hey, Jacqueline. Great
Hi,
stuff.
Scott.
A lot of really good points you made, and I found myself nodding in agreement with a lot of it. I guess the challenge I face is like taking this information, in the next week, the week after, the month after, and I just feel like I get this information, I get these tools, and I struggle to, when the situations present themselves, go back and kind of dig up the tips or apply some of this type of knowledge in those situations. So how do you, is there any, do you have any advice?
Yeah, can you give me a specific example, Scott? Because that might be easier.
I guess, the challenge I face is just, I manage a team of about 10, and Berkeley is very heavily, it's very meeting heavy, also very consensus driven. And, I feel like sometimes the personal dynamics get in the way of progress. And I think a lot of what you've talked about in terms of the fear and the courage, when you have someone who might be more fearful and someone who's a little more courageous, then it gets in the way of making progress. So in those types of situations, I think I find myself struggling to say, like, how do I promote the dialogue amongst the group to move those discussions along? I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense, Scott. And I can hear what you're saying here, because there has to be an agreement in how one is communicating. That is number one, and I think that, to your point, you're looking for consensus. But unless you've checked in with everybody to make sure that you are all on the same page, it's going to be very hard to get that consensus. So I would say, this again is going to have to be maybe a one-on-one with everyone to be able to go through some of the issues that might be coming up for you. But to be able to apply this is, again, admitting you don't know everything. That's a big one right there.
Yeah, that's helpful.
Yeah, and when you can say, yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have all the information I need. Can you help me? People are very happy to step in. Can you help me? Yes, absolutely. But again, knowing who you're talking to becomes a big piece of this. I have a company right now I'm working with. Their communication skills suck. They've lost millions of dollars because their communication was really bad, and they're having to learn how to talk to each other using my communication program, where it teaches them how to communicate more effectively. But a lot of it has to do with asking questions and being open to the responses. And that's really key to it. But that would be the best advice. And again, admit I don't have all the information I need. I don't know.
Yeah. I think that's a good approach, and maybe just to post it on the monitor serves as a reminder.
I love that. I love that.
But thank you. Appreciate it.
You're very welcome, Scott. Good luck.
Well, Jacqueline, thank you so much for spending this hour with us. Powerful, resonating, thoughtful, as always. It is so fun to have someone like you in our network. Now you've, connected with all these folks. We'll go ahead and send out this video as well as Jacqueline's slides. So her contact information will be there if any of you need to continue the conversation or want to learn more about the amazing work she does. We'll make sure to provide that in a post-meeting follow-up. So Jacqueline, thank you so very much for being with us today.
It's totally my pleasure. And thanks everyone for participating. I really appreciated that.